Ocarina of Time is one of those games that defined my childhood. I remember booting up the N64 for the first time and stepping into Hyrule and being blown away. It's one of the few games that I can say left a very lasting mark. It stayed with me, and it's still one of my all-time favorites. It's top 3, if not top 2. I would almost give it number 1, but I'll explain more later. Now we fast forward to the last 3-4 weeks where I have been playing the 3DS version, Ocarina of Time 3D. And it honestly is like rediscovering the game all over again, but with a nice fresh coat of paint. In this video, I'm going to share why Ocarina of Time is so special to me, how the 3DS version took an already legendary game and made it even better, and why I think this game will forever be one of the most important titles in gaming history. And I mean, I have nothing to add here that hasn't already been said 10 times over online. I mean, everything about Ocarina of Time I feel like has been said, but it's so important, it's so special, and honestly, it's still such a mind-blowing game that I just want to talk about it. Jumping way back in time, the first experience I had with Ocarina of Time, I didn't own an N64, but I was at a family friend's house for Thanksgiving, and there were like 2 older sons of this family friend, whatever, and upstairs they were like, yo, come check this out. They had Ocarina of Time on this little tiny TV, one of those old CRTs that has a VCR right below it, and they were playing in the Forest Temple as adult Link. And it was my first time seeing, I think, a Nintendo 64 in motion, and then also a 3D game like that. You see, I don't know if anybody who wasn't around during that transition can fully appreciate just what a leap forward Ocarina was for 3D gaming. They had just gone from peak 2D game design. Like, if all you have seen is mainly SNES games, and maybe a little peek at some PlayStation 1 stuff, seeing Ocarina of Time was unbelievable. I remember them pulling the bow out, shooting the paintings where the Poes were, and I could not wrap my head around how cool it was. They let me pick up the controller, and I played, and I ran around, and I don't really remember what I did. I accomplished nothing, and I just remember being so heartbroken when downstairs I could hear them yelling, hey, Thanksgiving dinner is served, come downstairs, because I did not want to stop. And then I remember a few years later getting a Nintendo 64, and there were 2 games that I wanted, like 2 games that I really remember, and it was Ocarina of Time and Star Fox 64. And those 2 games, probably more than any other games in my life, I think I've got the most vivid and fond memories of. I remember playing as a kid Ocarina of Time and just getting lost in that world. Riding around Hyrule Field on Epona, and then fishing. I would spend so many hours fishing in that game. I remember I caught a gigantic fish one day, and this is all like pre-internet, at least for the age I was. I didn't have a strategy guide. It was all sort of just figuring things out on my own. And so when you caught this gigantic fish, it felt like this insanely special moment. I'd never experienced a like semi-open world-ish game before, and it's funny to call it an open world game because there's not that many locations, especially playing it back through as an adult now. It's kind of surprising, right? It seems so much bigger as a kid, but truly, I cannot stress enough how incredible that game was and what a leap forward it had been. Now that 3D action-adventure blueprint that Miyamoto basically pioneered at the time. Obviously, there were other games doing somewhat similar, but nothing that had the weight, I feel like, or the reception that Ocarina did. This laid the blueprint for like every game moving forward. Almost every 3D adventure game we play today has some root or design element that you can trace back to some of the revolutions that Ocarina of Time made, or games in and around that era. The game pioneered the awesome Z target system because this was on the N64 with the crazy, triple nunchuck looking controller. You didn't have the ability for right stick camera control that we're used to. The whole dual analog thing wasn't around. So how do you actually stay looking where you want to? How do you lock on to targets? And playing it through again on the 3DS recently, it's great. The speed of that Z targeting system, you really can get quite good moving around the world. I obviously now would prefer twin analog controls, but they did a great job. The combat, way ahead of its time. Not Dark Souls, of course, but there are some moments in the game where the combat against Stalfos is really enjoyable, right? And you are blocking and parrying and side hopping and jump slashing. You've got so many cool puzzles. And this is an area the 3DS version improves upon substantially, especially in the Water Temple, with the visuals making things quite a bit more clear to the player where you're at, and a few quality of life things that I will mention. But the world itself is just so immersive. Hyrule, in and of itself, is a character. The story is emotional, and the soundtrack is straight up legendary. Koji Kondo's music, it is like, I don't really know. It stuck with me more than probably any of the game design itself. Some of these themes and some of these locations, they feel real because it was all perfectly orchestrated together. The music, the gameplay, the world design, the immersion, which sounds so silly when you look at a game that looks like this today, but it's still really, really immersive. Now, I wanted to try the 3DS version because, believe it or not, I never beat Ocarina of Time casually, like my entire life. When I was in college, the whole OOT speedrunning scene was just blossoming, and I got into any percent speedruns long before it became sort of the crazy, ludicrous category that it ultimately did. But back when runs were 25, 26 minutes, and then I think my best run was like a 21 minute and 12 second thing. And what I would do is the anti-percent run back in the day, you would get basically to the boss room of the Deku Tree, and you would wrong warp to the castle escape sequence right after you've beaten Ganondorf. Run down to the bottom of the castle, take out Ganon as Child Link, and you really could beat the game quickly, and it was a ton of fun. And so I've beaten OOT like 50 times, any percent, and then I tried to learn any percent, no wrong warp. I tried to learn MST, so I've beaten the game quite a few times in speedrun scenarios, but never casually, never going through it the intended way until this playthrough. Like I said, as a kid, there were no guides. I got hung up all the time. I got stuck all of the time. And there are some things that are not that intuitive. There's a few puzzle designs and locations that even as an adult, I was like, I need to look this up. It's a totally hidden little chest under some dirt, and I have to bomb the dirt to see where the chest was? Like, how would I have ever figured this out unless I just banged my head against the wall for a while or looked really closely on the map, I guess. So I was pretty excited to try and do a full casual run on the 3DS version because it brings with it visual improvements. You go from 20 FPS, I know, crazy, right? The original N64 version runs less than a 24 FPS film does. The 3DS jumps up to 30 FPS. You have improved textures, improved models, and of course, that smoother frame rate, which makes the game feel quite nice. The touchscreen integration is also pretty great. It streamlines the menu system and item management as well as navigation all into one spot, gives you a few new item things that you can have equipped using the touchscreen. And what's really, really nice, honestly, is the ability for you to equip your iron boots or the hover boots straight from the touchscreen without having to pause gameplay. That can be pretty disruptive, especially in the Water Temple in the original N64 version. The quick access to the items, the faster switching, these are modern tweaks that keep the game basically the same, but add just a layer of quality of life that really improves it. Plus, the 3DS version, once you've beaten the game, gives you the Master Quest version with remixed dungeons, the mirrored world, all this added replay value for you to go through the game once again. Now, I mentioned it's not my favorite game of all time. That goes to Final Fantasy X, but I can pretty confidently say I think it is one, if not the most important or greatest games just ever made. The seamless blend of exploration and puzzle solving, storytelling, I did mention 3D games were in their infancy, so the Z targeting system revolutionized combat and the camera, and it became a staple in so many games that followed. And frankly, just the way the game is constructed and built, you can look at The Witcher 3 or Elden Ring, even Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom. These have ties to the design philosophy of OOT. Beyond the gameplay, the emotional depth and the storytelling were on another level for the time. OOT has given us some of the most iconic characters in gaming, from Link and Zelda, Ganondorf, and moments that will still stick with players, pulling the Master Sword out for the first time, stepping into the future where everything had changed. It is no wonder why this game consistently ranks as one of the greatest ever made. And even though it was a product of the late 90s, that influence is all over the place in modern games. Anytime you see a lock-on system, open world exploration, puzzles, and combat blended together, you have to give a little bit of a nod to OOT because, yes, while those elements had existed in the 2D space, nobody really at the time had put it all together in that way in a 3D environment. It really was a turning point for the entire industry. It was a turning point for me when I first saw it. It really was something beyond what I thought games were at the time. And going through, again, here the last 3-4 weeks on the 3DS, this version of the game, it is awesome. It is absolutely awesome. The 3DS is kind of great in 2024. I'm not going to lie. I've been picking up and playing it more often. I have a new 2DS that I bought way back when I was doing Monster Hunter content for Monster Hunter World because I wanted to play like Monster Hunter 4 Ultimate and all that stuff. And it's kind of sat on my shelf until recently, but the more I'm playing it, the more I'm realizing there's so many great games on this system. The clamshell design is all great, so maybe we'll talk about it in a future video. Ocarina of Time is amazing. The 3DS version is great. And if you have never played this game, I really recommend that you find a way to play it. It runs great on emulator. It runs really well. The original N64 does. I don't know. I've never messed with 3DS emulators or stuff like that, but the N64 version runs very well on the Wii VC, and if you have a Wii, it's very easy to soft mod it. Wii U, you can do similar. If you've got the GameCube, I never actually got to try the GameCube version, so I don't really know. But yeah, those are the easy ways to sort of play the game. I know Nintendo Switch Online has their subscription version, and you can play the game there. It's also emulated there, and I've heard it's not the best way to play it. So if you are interested, ask in the comments and I can give more details about the spots and the recommendations and where I would say is a good spot to play it. Thank you very much for watching this video. If you enjoyed it, if you want to see more 3DS stuff, just let me know. I hope you have a great start to your week, and I will see you again on Wednesday.